the New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
Well, you thought AI was going to bring the world to an end. Maybe not. But today we're going to be delving into Elon Musk's Neuralink and the approval that that has been given to go ahead with connecting maybe your brain, somebody's brain at least, to some wires and to Bluetooth and to the outside world. So just part of what we're going to be talking about on the New Zealand Tech Podcast today. I'm your host, Paul Spain, and with me is Brett Roberts. Great to see you, Brett.
It's good to see you again.
Thanks for joining us in the studio.
Thank you for having me.
Maybe you can remind listeners where you fit into this big wide world of tech in New Zealand.
I've been in the tech world for a while. I'd hate to think how long, a decade or two or three. And right now I'm the community director for an organisation called kiwiSaaS. So we're working with Kiwi software as a service companies to grow their overall sector, grow their capability, and take more SaaS export products to the world.
Sounds like a pretty satisfying role, because this is the sort of thing that we all want to see grow for New Zealand, as our digital economy, our weightless exports, and to really give New Zealand a bit of a lift up.
You're using all the right words. It's pretty cool. We think we'll do the pitch. We think there's about 14,000 people in the sector. We think it generates about 2.2 billion a year in revenue. And New Zealand's market share overall worldwide on a really good day with the wind behind us might be about 0.3%. So the opportunity for growth is huge. The high-paying jobs, the average job in the SaaS sector in New Zealand pays double the New Zealand median wage today. It's a great role. It's a great community, great bunch of companies, and there's just a ton of opportunities. So.
Well, we do have an episode coming up that's in the bag that I know Joe Allen has produced and edited, that'll be coming out soon from your recent event. So there'll be a bit more to delve into on that topic. But let's get in there. Big thank you to start with to our show partners, to 1NZ, 2 Degrees, Spark, NZ, HP, and Gorilla Technology. But let's start with a bit of a New Zealand focus, and there's I think some interesting and important topics to delve into. First up, we heard from Chorus around a partnership and some work that they've been facilitating, which takes advantage of the dark fibre that Chorus has that runs through the Alpine fault sort of seismic zone in the South Island, the Southern Alps. So they've got this fibre that's sitting there, dark fibre. Is the term for that fibre. That is the fibre optic cable that's been laid, but it doesn't have a customer utilising it at the moment, and so. They've been taking advantage of that in conjunction with the Australian National University, and I think Victoria University in Wellington. And there's been this work going on to really have a closer look at what's going on from a seismic perspective. And because of the nature of fiber optic cable, and that it runs right across. I mean, you couldn't afford to run this sort of thing for a research project,
right.
But of course it's already there. So they're able to do some really innovative things. And usually they'll have if they're measuring a particular area, they might have a probe, X number of, kilometers apart and so on. But I mean, this allows them to measure, down to very, very, close and sort of specific, distances that they wouldn't really be able to get data on otherwise. Sounds really cool.
It sounds really cool. In fact, I heard an interview on Radio New Zealand about this a week or two or three back. It was absolutely fascinating. There's a few things that popped into my head. One was, like, on the two sides of the fault, when they're laying the fibre, do they kind of go, oh, we might throw another 30 or 40 meters in just in case it moves one day. Maybe they do. I don't know, hopefully they do. But the whole idea of using something that's already there to measure something that's so important, I just thought was a really cool thing. And according to this article I'm reading, the device that does the measuring is called an interrogator. So I don't know who's in the product team that invented that, but their marketing could do with a little bit of nuance, I think. But anyway, yeah, pretty cool piece of tech, actually.
Yeah.
And the fact that they can, they know exactly where the fault is and that they can measure it like that, I think it's a really neat thing to do.
Yeah.
The interview on Radio New Zealand's well worth listening to. It was pretty cool.
Definitely. And one of the, I guess, there were a few bits that sort of came through from from the reporting, from their coverage, and also in the material that that Chorus sent through. And really it's about this challenge, right? Because there's the events that go on maybe on almost sort of semi-continuous basis are very, very small. But if you can actually collect that data and combine it all together, then you end up with a much richer knowledge set. And of course there's huge gaps at the moment. Obviously there is data that gets collected, but not at this sort of granularity. So yeah, I think it's really really encouraging, and great to see Chorus participating as a private entity to this research and making that possible.
I just love the thought that someone had this random thought one day of doing that. I don't know whether it was Chorus or someone at Victoria University maybe, but what a brilliant idea.
Yeah. Now another topic that's that tends to get some attention from time to time is the challenge that we have with global entities, international companies that operate in New Zealand. And of course, as we move to a world where technology is so dominant, and global entities have so much power, and we look to whether it's the role of Amazon in the e-commerce space, which in the US, the number that sticks in my mind anyway is that they've got the majority of all e-commerce in the US, over 50% market share, right? And whilst they're not in that position in New Zealand, that's slowly growing as they offer free shipping from Australia into New Zealand. They could well open here in the future. We're starting to see more international players at a retail level. So IKEA are on their way. We've got Costco, but it's probably the tech players that have stood out for us the most. Tech enabled video with Netflix and other streaming services, and of course Apple, Google, Microsoft, and so on. So we see huge amounts of money that filter through New Zealand, but New Zealand doesn't seem to clip the ticket much from a tax perspective. And I think we were chatting before we started, and I was saying this is a topic that has sort of kept me awake at night on the odd occasion where I've been lying there trying to work out, and I'm no tax specialist, but trying to work out, what are the ways in which we can solve this issue. And I certainly haven't sort of come to any massive brainwaves on how to do it, because as soon as I have an idea, we could do that and we will get a cut, and then I think, okay, so we're going to get a 15% cut or a 1.5% cut or whatever it is. They'll just add that onto the price for for Kiwi businesses or Kiwi consumers and so on. But you've got a fair bit of insight into this sort of thing from your years in the business world. What are some of the things that you've seen, be it from the Microsoft world, where I know you've had a fair bit of visibility to some of the things that they've done. And look, I think all entities are, you could say guilty, but all entities are going to want to do right by their owners, their shareholders, probably ahead of necessarily the individual markets in which they tend to operate, right?
It's an interesting situation, right? It's easy to tax, or easier to tax atoms than it is bits, and that's always been a challenge. And the fact that you can move ownership of those bits very easily as well is part of the challenge. So it's two things. It's the nebulous nature of cloud delivered services, and then the fact that who owns those services can be moved. So I'll give you the example that I saw fairly close up. So while I was at Microsoft back in the day, the state of Washington, which is where Microsoft was headquartered, were making a few noises about implementing a 1 or 2% tax on software companies. Obviously, Microsoft being the key target at the time, they were the biggest software company in Washington State, I believe. And so Microsoft weren't keen on that, funnily enough. And so when they became concerned enough to do something about it, what they did was they spun a new company up in Reno, Nevada called Microsoft Licensing Inc. They signed over all of Microsoft's IP rights to that company. They started with the OEM product. That's the product that would go on to Windows and Office, that went on to new machines that manufacture. And all of a sudden, Microsoft in Redmond and Washington no longer owned that software and no longer generated revenue from that software. This other company that at the time had like 10 people in Reno gathered all of that revenue, and Reno said they wouldn't implement a tax. That company still exists, I believe. And so, it's like playing one of those games with the ball and the cup, and you're just continually kind of chasing things around, right? So that's, there's two challenges in that. I understand, I think it's France or one of the countries in the EU implemented a tax recently where they're taxing revenue rather than profitability, which makes sense to me. And in case no one's worked out already, I am not a tax expert at all. But I think most countries around the world are probably trying to figure out how they clip the ticket in a fair and equitable way of companies who have traditionally paid little, if any, tax in country where they're generating the revenues out of. I think it was last year that Facebook paid no tax. There was a news story either last year or the year before where the average New Zealander paid more tax than Facebook. There is something unfair and inequitable in that. I think most people would agree. Figuring out a system that is fair and equitable for the company as well, and can't just be gazumped by somebody ascribing intellectual property rights from this company over there to that company over there and moving things, like the shell game, is challenging. So I'm sure minds smarter than ours are working on this on both sides of the equation, both on the IRD side and the company side, right?
Yeah, look, I think it is really challenging. And, of course, there's that aspect of thinking of Kiwi companies that are operating in international markets and trying to find the appropriate ways so they're not being double taxed as well.
Correct.
So that we made a profit over there, but if we move it around this way, then we're getting charged twice. So our profits disappear a lot more quickly.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing actually is all of these elements are complex and take some work to get it right. Ireland seems to be one of those places where a lot of companies will move to. Interesting, I was talking, might have been RNZ last week about Pinduoduo, which is the parent company of Temu, which is this new e-commerce.
It's messing up my social media feeds.
That's making a mess, and I think probably has all sorts of risks from a data privacy and cyber security perspective. And interestingly, that they were certainly, on the US side, it looked like they were trying to distance themselves from China, even though they're very much a Chinese company, and treating themselves, we're a US company and so on, was one of the comments that a journalist shared with me. And when I looked it up, actually what their parent company PDD Holdings have apparently just done is moved their headquarters from China to Ireland, and that probably has some tax benefits. But also in their case, where they're trusted, no, you can trust us. We're not closely linked with a communist with the Chinese Communist Party, or this and that. Look, we're not even a Chinese company anymore. So there's all sorts of maneuvers that go on for all sorts of reasons, and some of it is very much tax related. But I hope that we can keep pushing forward. The article that the spin-off published was around how New Zealand plans to force tech giants to finally pay their taxes. And look, I think we have to wait and see how these endeavours actually play out. And yep, we might get a little bit more tax, but does it just mean that as New Zealanders we end up paying a higher rate for everything we get, from Netflix to Facebook advertising for businesses and the like, right, across the board, and maybe for our smartphones and other gadgets.
There's a whole lot of things playing into this, right? The numbers are absolutely ginormous. If you read that article, they're talking about, according to the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, BEPS, which is, what is it? Base erosion and profit sharing, catchy little acronym, practices cost countries US $100 to $240 billion in lost revenue annually, right? The numbers are just huge. But of course, the other challenge,
shifting, I think it was.
Your profit shifting, sorry. Yep. Yeah. The challenge is that those companies can all change their prices whenever they want anyway, and do. In fact, right now in the kind of an economic downturn, and with companies like Netflix and Disney and others seeing some churn in their customer base, they're just capable of and more than happy to ratchet pricing up to drive the top line as needed. So I wouldn't worry too much about tax pushing price up. Other things will push the price up and very rarely down as well. It's a tricky situation. Singapore has preferential tax regimes. So does Ireland, Luxembourg. In fact, one of the very well-known, very large tech companies who has a very large presence here in New Zealand, if you go back through their company's office filings, you can see where the directorships lie, or where the ownership lies. And this particular one, it has been Luxembourg, it's been Singapore, it's been Ireland. They move as needed, and it's all perfectly legal. It's not tax evasion, it's tax avoidance, which is perfectly legal. And the challenge here is that the tax system is, from the early 1900s, dealing with companies that haven't even been around 50 years yet, that are way ahead of the game. So
yep. And
I'm sure they'll figure these things out over time. But
yeah, and if we move to a kind of a more digital, turn the knobs on a faster moving basis, you might solve some issues, and I think we will. But there will undoubtedly be some surprise consequences.
The law of unintended consequences.
So you imagine, right. Okay, we're going to force this tax based on revenue or whatever it is, so that the New Zealand government's getting a slice of whichever of these big companies' revenue, and then you say, well, and you're not allowed to adjust your prices, outside of whatever the rule set is, compared to US prices, compared to whatever, or particular rules. Yep. And you can imagine, maybe that could work. But of course, then there'll be consequences, and there'll be companies that are like, okay, we're closing up shop in New Zealand. You're making it too difficult. Hard. And then New Zealanders are like, what? We don't have Netflix anymore, or what have you. And we saw this to a degree. Where Australia was, being threatened by Google.
Google, that's right.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a number of them where Google were like, well, maybe we'll just exit Australia. And I can't imagine that would have gone down too well for the government, for consumers to lose, an entity of that sort of scale. Although to me, it seemed like all bluster, which I think it largely was. But we have some interesting challenges here to deal with, but I think it is important that we keep moving forward, we keep investigating and trying to come up with solutions. Now, of course, the shoe would be on the other foot if we were living in the US and we were looking at how do we make sure our companies do as well as possible,
Yeah, correct.
and could be on the other foot in the future as we grow our SaaS, our software exports, and more of our revenues coming that way, and then we might be wanting to push back a little bit on what other countries are doing. So there's some complexity.
I don't see this getting figured out by the end of this week. I think it's going to take a little while.
Yeah. Now, Google have some AI tech that is there to help forecast where flooding might occur, and they've just launched that to cover New Zealand. So Flood Hub, it's one of Google's services. And it began, I think, around 5 years ago when they trialed it in India and Bangladesh, but it's been spread out to more locations, and now we have this level of capability for New Zealand, able to get push notifications in some areas. I don't think in New Zealand just yet. But this sort of thing's coming where, really the data that they're receiving in, and by applying AI to that, we'll be able to give a heads up, and, joining up some dots and doing some smart stuff will do what AI does, which is predict and give us a heads up on what might be coming, so that we can prepare. Now, I don't know, how much faster and better that is than what we've had to date, but the fact that Google are doing it, I'm sure others will be doing it, and it is one of the niceties of innovative companies like Google, is that we get the benefits of the R&D that they're doing at scale around the world.
It's pretty cool. I thought I wasn't even aware of this, but I think it's a really neat initiative on their part. The timeliness of it is the key thing, I guess, right? I mean, it was interesting. There was that flooding that happened in Waihi yesterday, where 44 millimeters of rain fell in 1 hour. I don't know whether it would be quick enough to predict that sort of thing, but the data exists. There's plenty of data sets out there, live data sets, and I guess it's just a matter of bringing all that stuff together. What a great opportunity too for advertising, right? It looks like you need a generator.
Yeah.
It looks like you need a pump. But yeah, pretty cool. I thought it was a neat, and that Google's a data company, right? I just thought it was a great idea to pull all that stuff together and make it available to people. So
yeah, no, really, really pleasing. And I've seen a bit of media coverage today. I've been off work and not paying too much attention to all of the little technicalities, but from it looks like around midnight last night we saw some DNS issues that from what I've heard appear to have been caused by an issue with changes at I guess in Internet NZ, effectively to do with domain security, I think was the details I saw there. Not ideal when these things happen, but this is sort of the nature of technology, and sometimes I guess we look at certain aspects of these things at a local level, and of course our entities here aren't of the scale of some of the the bigger entities elsewhere, and so a little change made locally that has a fault may not get addressed as quickly, or there may be a level of fault that you might not expect maybe for a bigger player. But that said, we look at our Microsofts and AWSs and Googles and Twitter and so on. I mean, every company has issues every organization has issues from time to time, don't they?
I'm just reading the press release from Internet NZ. So it was a a DNSSEC chain validation issue, which I have no idea what that means, but I love this sentence. The fault occurred during a routine Internet NZ procedure. Like, that's how all of these things are always. We were doing a routine thing, and then something broke, and it took us a long time to figure out it had broken, and it wreaked havoc. As you and I were talking about earlier, I think the thing that's interesting with this is it's a great reminder that the layer that we're currently consuming of the technology stack, at that, whether it's browsing the web or watching a movie or TikToking or whatever it might be, is the top very thin layer of a very deep stack that goes all the way down a long, long way.
Yeah.
And there are lots of interdependent pieces in that. Sometimes just breaking one piece of that jigsaw puzzle, torturing my analogy, can really damage things quite badly. And we do see these things every once in a while, right? Somebody pushes something that should be perfectly okay, and I'm sure has been tested to the nth degree, and it breaks everything. So I'm sure there'll be all sorts of what the heck went wrong conversations going on Internet NZ today. But
yeah, and I think we don't probably see generally the same scale of issues that we used to get in the earlier years of the internet, and there's much better understanding of what tends to be happening in each place. It's getting easier to isolate those things. And usually the processes that are in place afterwards means that the learning, goes back in, and some of these things are addressed much better. It does, it does vary according to the sort of the size and the the scale of them, as to how important they are. I remember with the domain name commission that are I guess sit under Internet NZ. I'm one that's always looking for a small productivity gain where it can be had, and so I would go to dnc.nz for the domain name commission, and you can do that today if you type the shorter domain name, and it does what's called a 301 redirect and takes you to dnc.org.nz. So you've saved yourself 4 characters or 50% of the
20 milliseconds
the typing, right? But that's what I would do, and I would routinely do that if I wanted to do a lookup with the domain name commission, and then somewhere along the line they made some changes. And the website would still come up when you went to dnc.nz, and you would go in and do your search, and it would fail with some, what looked like a fairly random error, because actually it wasn't actually configured to work properly with that. And it went on for months and months, maybe even a year. I've messaged them, once or twice, and no one seemed to understand what the issue was, who was handling their Twitter or who knows. But it didn't lead to any sort of fix. So sometimes these things are quite obscure. Obviously, today's issue was one that was impacting a large number of people and was well addressed. But we do still seem to have this oddity in the, I don't know how many years it is now. It must be well over 5 years since we moved to these shorter .nz domain names, where a lot of organizations still haven't completely got their head around, we own these shorter domain names, and we should be making sure the domain names that we own
to something
resolve and go somewhere. So and it's one we've talked about in the past to do with our banks. So I've just gone to bnz.nz, and they own that domain name. And after I alerted them a few years ago, they had that redirect to bnz.co.nz. Now I type bnz.nz, and it says, sorry, we couldn't find that website. 404, not found. And this is this is an entity that makes around $1 billion a year. They're paying for actually a redirect service that says in the corner of the screen, easy redir. So this is an issue, I think, unrelated to today's, that's been going on for maybe a year or two now with NBNZ. It's a sort of smaller thing, and
Interesting.
they just haven't got around to
Money's tight in the banking sector, Paul,
tidying it up. So
money's tight.
yeah.
This press release is beautiful. Actually, it's got some good stuff in it. Internet NZ has now identified that the new system has slightly different outputs compared to the old one. Okay. And then there's this great sense: the change we implemented can't be rolled back. So basically, it's for everyone else they need to go and sort it out. They did a great job, I do have to say, Internet NZ, of stepping right up immediately and getting on the front foot from the comms perspective, which I think they've done a really good job of. So
yeah, look, and I think we're generally very, very well well served here in New Zealand. I mean, there's all sorts of debate you could go into about all these things because you'll never please everyone, whether it's the cost of domain names or other aspects. But we do have a lot to be thankful for when it comes to varying aspects of the internet in New Zealand.
Yep.
Particularly in light of some of the media coverage that's been coming out of Australia regarding the NBN, what they call the National Broadband Network, which is it's been a very interesting endeavour for Australia. There's been a lot of politics involved. There's been a huge amount of money involved. I can't remember what the current investment levels are at, but I think north of 20 times what New Zealand has probably invested in our certainly in our fibre infrastructure with the ultra fast broadband. Yet they don't seem to be in a great state, and to some degree, Brett, I think you can link this to the fact that technology is always changing and improving. The goal of the NBN, my kind of rough version of it anyway, and I'm sure it's not quite accurate to their vision. But my recollection was really what they wanted to do with their national broadband network is to provide coverage to, and again I forget the percentages of the population, but very, very much as many people in Australia as possible. And how they did it then would vary according to where people were. But part of the issue was that led to a complete lack of fibre in places where really they probably should have been investing and installing fibre. Certainly they've got complexities with just how big Australia is. A decision made that they would invest in their own kind of satellite or satellites to cover Australia. And now we're hearing about people that have actually had fixed wired internet connections in Australia, leaving by the thousands to move to Starlink, which is actually a pretty pricey service now. And certainly we've got a chunk of the population in New Zealand that have done somewhat similar things, but usually if they're already on a wireless service of sorts, right? So a connection via mobile network where maybe there's not that much coverage and speed, but it seems to be a much bigger problem in Australia. I think the stats I read were 4,000 customers in 1 week leaving the NBN for Starlink, and 8,000 across a 3-week period that have been lost from their NBN network across to Starlink. So I mean, there's sort of probably quite a few different aspects here. One is the disruptive nature of new technologies and just how successful that Starlink are, or SpaceX with the Starlink product having beaten other players to the market, and the actual quality of the offering compared to the price point. They seem to have a reasonably good level that they've come into the market, and it's probably shocking a lot of people how how quickly they're scoring customers.
Well, this is second mover advantage, right? And this is just a genius move. Elon Musk could see a long way ahead. It's very hard burying hundreds of thousands of kilometres of fibre in the ground in a place the size of Australia. And so, and of course, right now, the price might be up there, but there are competitors coming out. In fact, there's already competitors throwing satellites into space. The price will come down, and I wouldn't be surprised if it just gets harder and harder for the NBN to compete, right? And also, I don't think they did the same quality job that was done here with regard to getting great fibre out to the vast proportion of the population. They've got a very big country. They can dig very valuable minerals out of the ground of. That's a good thing for them. We've got a much smaller country that we can maybe get fibre around to a vast proportion of the population more easily. So, I don't see this getting any better for NBN anytime soon, right? The only concern I would have is, Musk is, a mercurial critter. So, in fact, when Starlink first was proposed or mentioned, the first thing that popped into my head was that the likes of, the Sparks and the Telstras of this world should be absolutely terrified by that, right? It just abstracts completely any value they have of copper in the ground or anything like that. But it is at the mercy of Elon Musk, and he's done a wonderful job with Twitter, and it'll be interesting to see what he can do to with this. I don't know, but there are other competitors out there, right?
Yeah.
So I just don't see the price doing anything other than trending southwards, which will just make it harder for those that have invested billions in burying strands of glass in the ground, right?
Yeah, and in fact, there was news through. I think it might have been just this afternoon from, and I'll just see if I can pull it up. So this is just in the last couple of hours from Spark that they're trialing business grade satellite broadband service. So they've announced that they've entered into a partnering agreement with Netlinks, an ASX listed network as a service technology company, to supply Starlink business grade satellite broadband to customers later this year. And once they're through their trials that are currently underway with a small number of New Zealand businesses, that'll be something that's kind of off the shelf from Spark as a telecommunications and technology services provider. And of course, we've heard other somewhat similar noises from Vodafone, and I'm trying to remember exactly what 2 Degrees have said. I mean, they were certainly very upfront that they were using Starlink.
Yep.
As quite a a key part of what happened when we had the flooding and so on. So there's a lot of activity going on here, and some of it is definitely going to change the landscape. How that sort of plays out, I think is probably going to be somewhat complicated, because these business grade services, because of the way that Starlink operate, and the fact that certainly at this stage there are there's nobody kind of directly competing, because they put so many thousands of satellites up, and of course there will be competition, but it means they can sort of slice and dice these arrangements. So their business offering, last time I looked, was significantly more expensive than the consumer grade offering, and then they can come in with their different bits and pieces. So as you said, they will move their consumer type prices to win market share as they need to. Correct. And we hope that is always done in an appropriate manner that isn't used just to destroy companies by, we'll just drop our prices for a couple of years until say the wireless internet service providers are gone.
Business,
and we've heard some noises from that end, and concerns around Starlink playing fair. But then at the higher end, at the business end of the scale, when you've got virtually nothing else on offer, you can tweak your prices or when you're offering very high speed connections on a boat, you can charge whatever you like at this point when there's no competition. So some pretty interesting I guess aspects to how this plays out from a business perspective.
It's a fascinating story when you think about it. Like Musk, and my opinions of Elon Musk, he's a genius strategist, right? So combining democratization of rocket launches and getting stuff into space with putting his own satellites in there, and that's just like something out of a science fiction novel. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant, right? And of course, it's all software-defined radio stacks. And so when it comes to bandwidth available, therefore upload and download speeds and everything, all that stuff's tweakable. It's not all set in stone. At a fiber level in the ground, you need to change devices at the ends of fiber and all sorts of other things to change speed. Obviously, a lot of that still is configurable as well.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, the ability to change services, offer new products and services, change pricing, all that sort of thing. It's just incredible. I live in a almost rural area. We've got fiber, but you only have to drive a few hundred meters to places that don't have it. And not everyone, but just about the majority of folks around our area that were on wireless broadband have now moved to the Starlink and rave about it.
Yeah.
Love it. So great product, seems to be the right price. No one really complains about the price. Genius move.
Yeah,
it really is.
Now, I wanted to touch briefly just on a story that The Verge published, and they titled their story, HP has found an exciting new way to DRM your printer.
Such a Verge.
And the subheading where HP Plus means HP plus permanent DRM, digital rights management. And when it comes to printers, I think most of us have come to recognize that these low cost printers that you might pick up at just about any retailer, but whether it's a stationery store or just any kind of
Appliance store,
I don't know.
anywhere.
Yeah. And so the department stores will sell these things. And anyway, in their article, they're talking about a particular HP printer. $85 gets you this wireless color printer, scanner, and 6 months of free ink. And if you're interested in these sort of aspects of fairness, or you're thinking around buying a new printer, this is as well worth a little bit of a read, just to understand what some of the consequences are with these new models. And look, there's a real simplicity, and HP have in the past sent me some of these devices to try out these new sort of subscription based printers. And look, that simplicity where you don't have to think about ink, it's going to get sent to you. It's X dollars a month. There are aspects of that are like, this is the simplicity that's very helpful for the printer to be able to ping back and let HP know when your ink's low, and it will send you new ink and so on. I mean, it really does sound pretty brilliant, but there is a flip side to it. And in fact, one of the things they've highlighted is new that you have to accept terms, which means your printer could be blocked from using non-HP inks, or even modified inks in the future, and so on. So we have seen over many years a whole sort of market spring up of alternative inks, because when we're buying these printers, we're often maybe paying less than what the printer is, or should be worth.
Razors
and yeah, that's because they want you to come back and to buy your ink. But quite a fascinating piece here. You take an update to your printer, and then from from there on in, your printer is completely locked to to certain cartridges, or you get a scenario where you've been on a subscription, you cancel your subscription, there's still ink in your printer, but it came through the subscription, and so then do you still get to print or not? And we've heard of scenarios of well, do you still get to scan or not? There's a scanner on there that doesn't necessarily require ink, and there's a fair bit of coverage on these topics, but I haven't spoken about it for a while. And I saw the headlight, thought, yep, let's just mention it, because I think it is worth being aware of. I think my rule of thumb is the cheaper the printer is, probably the more expensive it's going to cost to run generally. And look, you can pay a lot more for some printers that are on a per page basis anyway, much cheaper to print. But of course, most of us are probably doing less printing these days than what we used to, right?
So this whole thing's been going on for decades, right? I mean, literally decades. This whole, particularly with HP, I think they've led the way, although the other printers have all done the same thing at some point. And yeah, I think anybody that walks into a store and buys a $90 printer that's got all of these sophisticated features on it, and then gets annoyed that the ink costs an arm and a leg, or that they DRM it, are probably living in some sort of limbo land economically wise. I think it is a razor and razor blades model, right? Having said that, for whatever it's worth, I went down this path just recently and had an HP printer that I had forever, and every time I bought ink for it, it always just used to irk me how incredibly expensive it was. And one day, all of a sudden, one of the brand new ink cartridges didn't work, and I decided that was it, and I was going to get rid of my HP printer. I bought a Epson EcoTank printer that you literally use bottles of ink and tip into.
Yep.
And yes, it costs, I don't know, $600 maybe. And I've printed thousands of pages on that since, and I might have spent $100 on ink. It's just it's a revelation once you go to okay, I'll pay a bit more for the actual device in the first place, but the ink is as cheap as chips, and it changes everything. I don't even think about how much we print anymore. Once upon a time, it's like, oh my gosh, every page is like 10 or 20 cents or whatever it is. So,
yeah.
So I think these things swing back and forth, but I don't think I'll ever buy a super cheap printer again. I think I'll always just pay the money up front. They last for years. So, yeah.
Yep.
I think anyone that gets caught out by this probably hasn't been paying enough attention over the last 10 years.
Yeah. And look, I mean, we still see quite commonly, businesses that get caught up with, they buy the wrong thing because, they just don't realize. And, I know we've built some sort of internal, tools for being able to work through, those key things. So when a small business needs a device, that you get something that's as close as you can reasonably predict based on their usage patterns and business requirements and so on. But yeah, we still see it to this day where people buy a printer. One recently was an organization spent, I don't know, 5 or 10K on a printer. They're a creative business, they need color accuracy. But whoever was looking after the purchase for them, IT provider or, what have you, didn't actually check that piece. So they blew thousands of dollars and they're, feeling like they've got a bit of a sore head for a number of years, having to deal with a not fit for purpose printer. But there you go. Now, last topic is all about brains being linked up to technology. And I guess that the big question that I pose, certainly one of the online links for the live stream today, is can we trust Elon Musk with linking our brains to the internet effectively, you could put it, because Neuralink, which is one of his entities, has won FDA approval in the United States. The Federal Drug Administration has given them the rubber stamp, apparently, to proceed with the human study of brain implants. Now, we've heard stories in the past, and I'm not sure whether any of them are true, but I did read something online talking about 1,500 animals that had lost their lives through varying testing, sheep, pigs, monkeys was the last demo we saw, and the monkey demos, I've got to say, were quite mind-blowing to see a monkey.
It's probably not quite the right term, but
playing Pong, to see this happening with look, no hands. It was a pure brain controlled game, and some of the possibilities for the future for those that maybe don't have control over limbs, or depending on whether the dreams of this technology can play out, and I certainly don't have enough in-depth knowledge to know how far they can take the technology, but by putting a wired connection to your brain and linking that up externally, there are talks of that ability to be able to control things like artificial limbs, to be able to communicate when you can't communicate through other means, and maybe, just maybe, give sight back to those who don't have it. That sounds like some pretty exciting stuff, but you've got to trust Elon's company, Musk's company, in the journey, or there are some other players in this area. What do you think? How does this play out? Are there going to be a lot of sore people? Do you see a way to a good outcome here, Brett?
As I said to you before we started this podcast, the last human being on the planet that I would allow to stick anything in my brain is Elon Musk. And in fact, if you read the Guardian article about from the 6th of December last year regarding some of the testing processes, they're appallingly bad, like really, really, really bad. They've made terrible mistakes that have caused animals to suffer. Elon Musk is riding the team really, really hard to get the product to market, which is causing, I think, which is the root cause of some of these issues, mistakes that are being made. And the whole concept of putting stuff in people's brains and doing those things, I think, is absolutely incredible, right? Without a doubt. And I'm sure, over the next 10 years, we're going to see these incredible advances on how this stuff, works. I was reading an article just recently where they were doing an experiment with reading the brains of, I think it was monkeys actually. And what they'd done is they had genetically modified the monkeys so that when their neurons fired, they gave off a pulse of green wavelength light. And they can literally put electrodes or sensors on the monkey's head and pick up through the skull the pulses of light. And they're using, so non-invasive from the point of view of probes and things. They can read what's going on in the animal's brain, which is just incredible. It was interesting just on this. And again, Musk is, as I said, a mercurial creature, right? Politically and a whole bunch of other ways, I have no time at all for the man, but he is a strategic genius, and he thinks, dimensions ahead of others on some of these things. I spoke to someone probably about 18 months, 2 years ago, who had a friend that had been hired by Neuralink, an engineer, very, highly talented engineer. And their story to the person I was talking to was that the whole thing around helping paralyzed victims, all that sort of thing, is the first step in this. Elon Musk is very much on the record as saying along the lines of that AI is a greater threat to mankind than nuclear weapons are, right? He has some serious concerns about the potential for AI. What this person was saying to the friend I was speaking to was that Musk's end goal here is to connect human brains as a counter to AI, which I thought was one of those, oh my God, it sounds like a James Bond movie kind of thing. And at the time I laughed at that, and now probably 18, in fact, it's probably 2 years down the track. I look at that now and gauge some of the other things he's done where he's outpaced others. And I certainly wouldn't write it off, right? The guy does think streets ahead of most others. So yeah, look, I wouldn't let him put anything anywhere near my brain. But if anyone's going to figure this out and do it, it's probably this guy. And you might be doing it in a roughshod manner at the moment. But yeah, just never never underestimate a motivated Elon Musk to get stuff done, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you look at
He's a
their
machine.
Tesla full self-driving, beta, and
Maybe that's not a good example. That's taken a little bit too long, okay? But
well, there's when you look at that, it shows elements of the genius, but elements of things don't always play out as planned, and there are dangers that we might not necessarily.
I think he's a genius strategist.
Expect, right?
I think strategically, he's a genius. I don't think he's anywhere near the smart engineer that people make him out to be. I don't think he understands software as well as he makes out. I think everything happening to Twitter shows that pretty clearly. They've run into all sorts of engineering issues with Tesla. They're now running into issues where he's had 10 years to get ahead of the Fords and the VWs and that, and they're all catching up pretty quickly. But the guy thinks streets ahead, and I think this is probably one of those examples.
Well, it's the sort of thing I think most of us hope that we're never in a position of needing.
No, exactly.
This type of technology, but there is an aspect there that hopefully the people that are on the team are good, solid people that will do good things. And I think I'm in the same in a similar camp to you, and that I certainly wouldn't be having Elon wiring stuff into my brain. But there's probably scenarios that some folks get into where you're in that position, and look, once it's tried and tested, and if there are trustworthy people involved, it's something you might consider.
We'll come back here in 10 years, and this will be commonplace technology. It'll be changing the lives of people that have been paralyzed or blinded or whatever it might be. We might have hooked all the brains in the world up so we can combat AI. Who knows? But this will go somewhere, without a doubt, right? And these things are always ugly at the beginning. I mean, it's just the nature of the beast. It's like the first heart transplants, the first heart bypass machines, all that type of thing.
Yeah,
you don't want to be the beta tester if you can possibly avoid it.
Well, there it is, folks. Join us again in end of May 2033. And we will look back on Neuralink and brain interfaces linked up to AI. The possibilities will probably literally blow your mind.
We'll be doing it in the metaverse.
It's crazy times ahead, but such is the nature of technology. Thank you, Brett, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you to our show partners, Gorilla Technology, HP, Spark, 2 Degrees, and 1NZ. And we will be back again with another episode next week. If you've been watching the live stream, do make sure to fire up your favorite podcast app on your phone and follow or subscribe to the podcast there. Of course, if you're listening to the audio, which is most of our audience, do jump in, whether it's YouTube, Twitter, or LinkedIn, and find us and follow there, so you've got a chance of being able to catch the live streams that tend to happen most Tuesday afternoons. And keep a lookout for that Southern SaaS episode that I know we've got coming up reasonably soon, if I've got that right, or is it already published? Okay, so it's already out. Sorry, I might have my wires crossed on that one. But thank you, Joan, for putting that one together, and thanks everyone for listening in. And we'll catch you on the next episode. Cheers.
Cool. Thank you.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.